6 months after the implementation of the Silver Dawn Initiative, Dodson Outpost had transformed from a struggling settlement into a thriving colony. The silver particles dispersed across the northern continent had done more than neutralize any remaining Priorian presence. They had fundamentally altered the ecology of our small corner of the planet in ways none of us could have predicted. The first unexpected change came 3 weeks after the initial silver dispersal. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, not the toxic dust storms we'd grown accustomed to, but genuine rain clouds. The silver nitrate particles, designed as weapons against the Cabrians, had begun seeding the atmosphere, catalyzing the first substantial rainfall Cabria had seen since our arrival 15 years ago. "It's cloud seeding," Ella had explained, her face illuminated by lightning as we watched the first downpour from the observation deck. "The silver nitrate particles provide condensation nuclei for water vapor in the atmosphere. We've accidentally triggered a climate shift." Those first rains had been both blessing and challenge. The deluge flooded the narrow valleys around our settlement, washing down millennia of untouched mineral deposits from the mountains. Temporary barriers had to be constructed to protect our fledgling infrastructure, and 3 weeks of round-the-clock work were required to build proper drainage system. But what initially seemed like a setback proved to be an unexpected gift. The floodwaters deposited rich silt across the previously barren plains surrounding the colony. Soil analysis revealed a complex mixture of minerals and organic compounds that had been locked in the mountain terrain for eons, now made available for cultivation. Where we once fought for every meal from our struggling hydroponic systems, fields of wheat, barley, quinoa, and amaranth now stretched beyond the colony's expanded perimeter. We'd focused all we could on hardy, nutritionally dense grains and vegetables that could withstand Cabria's still harsh climate cycles, thanks to our experience here. The other seeds we had in storage could wait for a later time when the planet's ecosystem was more stable. The fusion of our original colonists' survival knowledge with the Ogden crew's technical expertise had accelerated our development beyond anyone's expectations. Agricultural specialists from both groups had worked together to create new hybrid strains that thrived in the silver-enriched soil, producing yields that would have been considered miraculous back on Earth. I surveyed the new communication center from my workstation, a facility 3 times the size of the old hub, with equipment salvaged and enhanced from both colony ships. As systems integration specialist, I had overseen its design and construction, incorporating triple redundant systems for every critical function. My father's philosophy had become my mantra: never rely on a single point of failure. The primary systems ran on power from our fusion generators, with solar arrays as secondary backup and chemical batteries as tertiary. Water cooling systems had mechanical pumps with manual operation capability. Even the air filtration could be operated by hand-cranked bellows in an absolute emergency. Every critical system was triplicated, with at least one analog version that required no digital components whatsoever. "You've built a fortress," Shannon remarked, joining me for the morning systems check. Her role had expanded alongside mine, now leading a team of engineers who maintained our growing infrastructure. Triple backups for power, cooling, signal processing. Even the chairs have backup cushions, I smiled. My father used to say that in space, redundancy isn't paranoia, it's prerequisite. Well, your father would be proud. She gestured to the massive array of monitors displaying colony system status. All green, all stable. We haven't had a critical failure in 4 months. The memory of my father, his foresight in creating the original fail-safes that had saved us from the Cabrians, remained a powerful motivator. In the data archives recovered from the Ogden, I had discovered fragments of research from similar outposts across the galaxy. Each described elaborate backup systems, contingency plans, and emergency protocols. It seemed my father had been part of a larger philosophy among colony designers, one that prioritized survival through multiple layers of protection. I had taken those fragments and expanded upon them, implementing what Captain Krigsman now called the cobbler protocol, a systematic approach to colony infrastructure that built in not just backups, but backups for backups. with mechanical fail-safes for digital systems and analog overrides for mechanical ones. The cobbler protocol had been tested during the third major rainfall, when lightning had struck our primary communications tower. The digital systems had fried instantly and the power surge had damaged the secondary systems. But the tertiary, a purely mechanical radio system using vacuum tubes and analog technology that predated digital computing, had continued functioning without interruption. We lost some bandwidth and range, but maintained critical communications throughout the storm. "Have you seen the latest schematics for the new residential section?" Shannon asked, pulling up the plans on her tablet. "Ella's team incorporated your water reclamation redundancies, triple filtration with mechanical backups, and emergency silver treatment tanks in case of contamination." I nodded with satisfaction. The colony was growing, not just outward, but upward in complexity and resilience. Every new structure, every system expansion followed the protocol, ensuring that no single failure point could threaten our survival again. "Captain Craigsman wants an update on the long-range communications enhancements," Shannon said. "The Council's getting restless about the resource allocation." I nodded. The expanded communications array had been my most ambitious project, and the most controversial. It consumed significant power and required rare materials that some council members felt could be better used elsewhere. "Tell her we're at 93% completion. The final signal boosters will be online by tomorrow's end. Then we can expand our listening range to nearly 12 light-years." Shannon looked skeptical. "You really think there's anyone else out there to hear?" "The Ogden found us," I reminded her, "and they weren't even looking specifically for Cabria." "Captain Craigsman wants an update on the long-range communications enhancements," Shannon said, interrupting my thoughts. "The Council's getting restless about the resource allocation." I nodded. The expanded communications array had been my most ambitious project, and the most controversial. It consumed significant power and required rare materials that some council members felt could be better used elsewhere. "Tell her we're at 93% completion. The final signal boosters will be online by tomorrow's end. Then we can expand our listening range to nearly 12 light-years." Shannon looked skeptical. "You really think there's anyone else out there to hear?" "The Ogden found us," I reminded her. And they weren't even looking specifically for Cabria before she could respond. A distinctive tone. 3 rising notes sounded from the monitoring station. We'd designed different alerts for different systems. This one was for the long-range scanner. "That's impossible," Shannon muttered, moving quickly to the console. "The extended array isn't even fully operational yet." I joined her, watching as she pulled up the detection metrics. The screen displayed a signal pattern. Weak, but structured, definitely artificial. "Human?" I asked. "Unknown," she replied, fingers flying over the controls. "It's not matching any Earth protocols in our database, but it's definitely not random cosmic noise." I initiated the automated analysis sequence, a system I'd designed to categorize unknown signals based on mathematical patterns. "Where's it coming from?" "Bearing 227 Mark 43. About 8 light-years out." She looked up at me. "That's beyond where our array should be able to detect anything." A chill ran down my spine, not fear exactly, but the electric awareness that something extraordinary was happening. "Unless the signal is extremely powerful, or specifically directed at us." The analysis completed with a soft chime. The screen displayed its conclusion. "Possible artificial origin, 97.3% confidence. Partial match to human communication protocols, 62.8% confidence. Get Ella and Dr. Jefferson," I said quietly, "and inform the captains I need to try something." Within 20 minutes, the communications center had filled with key personnel. Ella arrived first, hair still damp from the shower. She'd been sleeping after working a night shift on the agricultural expansion. "What have we got?" she asked, immediately professional despite being woken. I'd spent the waiting time refining the signal analysis, isolating key pattern elements. "Something that looks partly human, partly not. It's repeating on a 6-minute cycle. Dr. Jefferson studied the waveform display with intense concentration. The non-human elements, they almost look like Cambrian communication patterns, but modified somehow. Captain Kriegsman and Captain Charles arrived together, followed by Counselor Warrens, who had apparently been meeting with them when the alert came through. "Are we in danger?" Warrens asked immediately, ever pragmatic. "I don't think so," I replied. "Whatever this is, it's just a transmission, and it's coming from too far away to pose an immediate threat." "Unless it's a warning," Captain Charles suggested grimly. Ella had been working at a separate console, running her own analysis. "I don't think it's a warning. Look at this frequency modulation. It's almost like a distress call," I finished, seeing the pattern she'd isolated. "But corrupted somehow." The room fell silent as we all processed the implications. After the silver had neutralized the Cambrian threat, we'd theorized that their presence might have been blocking or interfering with long-range communications. If that was true, then perhaps other human colonies had been trying to contact Earth, or each other, all along, their signals distorted or suppressed by Cambrian influence. "I think I can clean it up," Ella said finally, "but I need access to the primary array controls." I nodded. "Do it." For the next hour, we watched as Ella worked her magic on the signal, applying filtering algorithms and pattern recognition techniques she'd developed while maintaining the Ogden's aging communication systems during their years adrift. The rest of us offered suggestions or observations, but mostly stayed out of her way. Finally, she sat back. "That's the best I can do. Let's hear it." She activated the audio output, and a voice distorted and fragmented but recognizably human filled the communication center. "Colony vessel Hyperion to any human outpost, systems critical. Surrounded, lost contact with Earth 15 years. Coordinates follow. Using salvage tech to boost signal. Not much time." The message repeated twice before dissolving back into static. "Another colony ship," Captain Kriegsman breathed, "and they've integrated some kind of signal boosting technology." "Similar to what we've seen in Cambrian systems," Dr. Jefferson noted. "That's why the signal pattern looked partially familiar. I was already calculating the distance based on signal strength and degradation. If they're actually at these coordinates, they're 7.9 light-years from here, well beyond our planned exploration range." "Can we respond?" Captain Charles asked. Ella looked uncertain. "Maybe, if we reconfigure the entire array and push it beyond safety limits, but even then, there's no guarantee they'll receive it." Captain Kriegsman straightened, decision already made in her eyes. "Do it. If they're in trouble and using desperate measures to call for help, they need to know there's another option. And they need to know about silver," I added. "If they're surrounded by Cambrians." The implications hung heavy in the air. Another human colony, perhaps hundreds of people fighting the same battle we had, but without our crucial discovery. "I'll help Ella reconfigure the array," Shannon volunteered. "We can have it ready in 2 hours." As they worked, Dr. Jefferson pulled me aside. "Ravi, I've been thinking about something. If the Cambrians are weapons left behind by some ancient conflict, and they exist on multiple worlds, then the conflict wasn't limited to Cambria," I concluded. "It might have spanned multiple star systems." He nodded grimly. "And if the Hyperion has encountered them, then they are more widespread than we imagine." I felt the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. We need to warn every human colony we can find. When the array was ready, we gathered again to transmit our response. I'd composed a message that included everything essential: our location, our victory over the Cambrians, and most importantly, detailed instructions on how to create and deploy silver-based countermeasures. As Ella initiated the transmission, pushing our communications array to its absolute limit, I found myself thinking about my father again. He had designed backup systems to save our colony. Now, perhaps his legacy would extend to saving others across the stars. The transmission complete, we settled in to wait. At these distances, any response would take years to reach us, if it ever did. But 3 days later, another signal came through, stronger this time, clearly directed at us. The Hyperion had received our message and acknowledged it. They were attempting to synthesize silver compounds, but resources were limited. Their colony was under increasing pressure from Cambrian forces. Captain Charles stepped forward after the transmission briefing. "Captain Krigsman, with your permission, I'd like to propose a rescue mission." The operations center fell silent. "The Ogden's primary engines are still intact," he continued. "As you know, it's designed for interstellar colonization, with faster-than-light capabilities that can cover light years in weeks rather than years. We've been using it for parts, but the propulsion system and hyperspace motivators remain fully functional. With minimal modifications, we could mount a rapid rescue operation." "That's an enormous risk," Counselor Warrens argued. "We've just begun to establish stability here. The journey to the Hyperion would take only 3 weeks at maximum FTL," Charles calculated. "The Ogden was built to transport nearly 2,000 colonists. Even with most compartments sealed off, we could easily evacuate their entire population of 400-plus essential equipment." I studied Captain Charles, his weathered face showing the determination of someone who had already guided his massive colony ship through the darkness of space once before. Someone who couldn't ignore a distress call from fellow humans. Captain Krigsman considered for a long moment. "How many crew would you need?" 30, including myself. All volunteers." His eyes swept the room. The Ogden was designed to function with a skeleton crew of just 12 in emergency situations. "We can handle this." "I'll go," Shannon said immediately. "No," I countered. "We need you here. The communications array is still being expanded, and you're overseeing 3 critical infrastructure projects." Captain Krigsman nodded. "Ravi's right. We can't spare you, Shannon." "The rescue mission is approved," she continued. "Captain Charles, select your team. You have 1 week for preparation." The next 7 days were a blur of activity. The Ogden's massive hull, over 1 kilometer long, had been partially dismantled for materials, but its central systems remained operational. Engineering teams worked around the clock to recommission the life support systems and prepare the habitation rings that had housed colonists during the original journey. The scale of the vessel was intimidating. Designed to establish an entire colony, its cargo bays still contained prefabricated structures, agricultural equipment, and manufacturing facilities. Now, those same resources would be used to save another settlement. On the day of departure, I stood with Ella at the edge of the landing field, watching the massive colony ship power up its engines for the first time in months. Captain Charles approached us, dressed in his expedition gear. "Keep the lights on for us, Ravi. We should be back within 2 months, assuming everything goes according to plan." "When does anything ever go according to plan?" I replied with a wry smile, offering my hand. He clasped it firmly. "Fair point. But the Ogden's made for contingencies. We've loaded enough silver weaponry to neutralize a small army of Cambrians." Ella stepped forward and handed him a small package. "An analog radio transmitter, completely mechanical, no electronics that the Cambrians could detect or interfere with. If you need to communicate covertly near their territory." He tucked it carefully into his pack. "Thank you, this could save lives." We watched as he boarded the massive ship with his 30 volunteers, a mix of original Dodson colonists and Ogden crew who knew the vessel's systems intimately. The ground trembled as the colony ship's engines ignited, lifting the enormous vessel with surprising grace. It rose steadily into the clouds until only the blue flare of its propulsion was visible, then that too vanished as it accelerated toward orbit. "Do you think they'll make it?" Ella asked quietly. "If anyone can pull off a rescue across 8 light-years of hostile space, it's Captain Charles," I said. "And the Ogden was built for exactly this kind of journey." 6 weeks passed. The colony continued to expand, the silver-seeded rains establishing a regular pattern that farmers could plan around. New structures rose beyond the original perimeter, built to withstand both the weather and any potential threats. Each incorporated the cobbler protocol, redundant systems, mechanical backups, and fail-safes that could operate without power if necessary. Then, on an ordinary morning, our long-range communications array detected another signal, stronger than any we had received before, using standard Earth military protocols that hadn't been employed in 15 years. This time the message was crystal clear. This is Admiral Harry Dodge of Earth Defense Fleet vessel Prometheus to Dodson Outpost. We have received intelligence of your survival and discovery of effective countermeasures against the Nurax. Maintain position. Assistance convoy is inbound. Arrival estimated in 9 months. You are not alone. Earth stands with her colonies. The Nurax. Earth's name for what we had called the Cambrian. Earth, Shannon whispered, tears in her eyes. Earth is still there, still fighting. Dr. Jefferson was already analyzing the signal characteristics. This transmission is powerful, military-grade communications equipment, and perfectly aligned to penetrate the atmospheric interference we typically experience. Captain Kragsman's expression was one of cautious hope. If this is genuine. It's genuine, I confirmed after running verification protocols. The authentication codes match pre-colonization Earth Defense Fleet standards. This is really them. The news spread through the colony like wildfire. Earth had survived. Earth was coming. And they had been fighting the same enemy all along. In the weeks that followed, we learned more through periodic transmissions from Admiral Dodge. Earth had been battling the Nurax for 15 years, ever since the entities had simultaneously activated across dozens of worlds where humans had settled. Some colonies had been overrun. Others had managed to hold out through various defensive measures, though none as effective as our silver solution. The Earth Defense Fleet had been stretched thin, trying to evacuate colonies under immediate threat while maintaining a defensive perimeter around Earth itself. Our silver discovery was being hailed as a potential turning point in what they now called the Silicate War. 2 weeks before Admiral Dodge's estimated arrival, our sensors detected the Ogden returning to Cambrian space. The massive colony ship's signature was unmistakable, though it was moving slower than when it had departed. Captain Charles had completed his mission in record time, under 2 months instead of the projected 3. The landing was controlled chaos. The Ogden's enormous hull showed visible battle damage, with portions of its outer armor scarred by what looked like acid burns. But it had achieved what seemed impossible. The ship carried not just the planned 400 Hyperion colonists, but an additional 200 survivors from a nearby research outpost that had also been under siege. We got there just in time, Captain Charles reported during the debriefing, his face showing the strain of command but also deep satisfaction. The Hyperion colony was nearly overrun. Their last defenses were failing when we arrived with the silver weapons. Their reaction? Captain Kragsman asked. Disbelief, then desperate hope. He smiled tiredly. The silver worked exactly as predicted. We neutralized enough of the Nurax forces to clear an evacuation corridor. We had to adjust our plans when we detected the distress signal from Research Station Gamma just half a light-year from the Hyperion. That's where the additional survivors came from. Among the rescued colonists was Dr. Maxine Hemingway, the Hyperion's chief scientist, who had managed to preserve crucial research data despite the evacuation. The Nurax aren't just on Cambria and our world, she explained during her initial assessment. Based on communications we intercepted, they're on at least 17 habitable planets in this sector alone. It's as if they were pre-positioned, waiting for human arrival, or any carbon-based life, Dr. Jefferson suggested. Remember, they're weapons. They may not differentiate between species, just recognize patterns of technology and settlement. Dr. Hemingway nodded. That matches our observations. They seemed particularly triggered by our power generation systems. The integration of over 600 survivors began immediately. Unlike our gradual preparation for the original Ogden crew, this was crisis management on a massive scale, finding housing, medical care, and psychological support for people who had endured months of siege followed by a harrowing rescue. To my surprise, the Ogden itself became part of the solution. Captain Charles proposed leaving the massive ship grounded to serve as temporary housing while permanent structures were built. Its vast internal spaces, designed to sustain a colony during years of space travel, could easily accommodate the survivors while our construction teams expanded the settlement. "It's not going anywhere soon anyway," he said pragmatically. "The hyperdrive sustained damage during our escape from the Hyperion system. Repairs would take months we don't have." I found myself working with Dr. Hemingway to analyze the data she had brought. Detailed observations of Nurak's behavior and tactics that complemented our own knowledge. Together with Ayla and Dr. Jefferson, we began compiling what would eventually become the definitive strategic guide for fighting the silicon-based threat. 3 months later, with the Hyperion and Research Station survivors beginning to integrate and the colony expanded to accommodate them, our long-range sensors detected multiple objects decelerating toward Cabria. The Earth Defense Fleet had arrived early. The first landing craft touched down carrying Admiral Harry Dodge himself, a tall, weathered man with the bearing of someone who had seen too much war but refused to be broken by it. "Cabria," he said, testing the name as he stepped onto our soil. "We've been calling it Outpost Delta 9 in our star charts. It's good to finally see it with my own eyes." Captain Craigsman performed the formal welcome, introducing key colony personnel. When my turn came, Admiral Dodge gripped my hand firmly. "Ravi Cobbler, your silver solution has already saved thousands of lives. We've implemented it on 3 other colonies with similar success." "My father laid the groundwork," I said, uncomfortable with the praise. "And it was a team effort." "Always is," he nodded approvingly. "That's how humanity survived, together." The fleet had brought supplies, reinforcements, and news from Earth. The Silicate War continued, but the tide was turning. The Silver Countermeasure had given human forces a reliable way to neutralize Nurak's threats permanently, not just contain them. "We've been fighting a holding action for 15 years, Admiral Dodge explained during the formal briefing. "Evacuating colonies when possible, fortifying others, trying to understand what we were up against. The Nurak's activation was simultaneous across all affected worlds, a coordinated attack that caught us completely unprepared." "Do you know who created them?" Dr. Jefferson asked. "Or when?" "Not with certainty. The leading theory is that they're remnants of an ancient conflict between civilizations that predates humanity by millions of years. The Nurak seem designed to lie dormant until they detect certain technology signatures, then activate to eliminate the threat." "And we triggered them?" Captain Craigsman said. "All of us did, across every colony," Dodge nodded. "But now, thanks to Cabria, we have a way to fight back effectively. The fleet brought something else, the means to re-establish permanent contact with Earth and other colonies. Advanced communication relays were deployed in orbit around Cabria, creating a stable link to the interstellar network that Earth had been painstakingly rebuilding. For the first time in 15 years, colonists could send messages to family members on Earth or other settlements. Many discovered that loved ones they had presumed dead were alive after all. Others received confirmation of losses. It was a time of mixed emotions: joy, grief, relief, and renewed purpose. 1 month after the fleet's arrival, Captain Charles announced his intention to embark on another rescue mission. The Ogden's hyperdrive had been repaired with parts from Earth vessels, and new intelligence indicated another human settlement in distress. "The Tau Ceti colony," he explained, 3,000 settlers, holding out against Nurak's forces for years. Earth's been trying to reach them, but the defensive perimeter is too strong for conventional military approaches. "But not for our silver countermeasures," Admiral Dodge added. "With the Ogden's capacity and the silver weapons we've developed here, we could extract the entire population." This time, Shannon's request to join the mission was approved. 60 volunteers from Cabria signed on, including several Hyperion survivors eager to pay forward their own rescue. On the day of the Ogden's second departure, the entire colony gathered to see them off. The massive ship, now bearing the emblem of both Earth's defense fleet and Cabria's Silver Dawn symbol, rose into the morning sky with purpose, not fleeing as it once had, but racing to save others. 6 weeks round trip, Ella said, watching the ship disappear from view. "Longer if they find more settlements in need." "They'll make it," I said with confidence. "And they'll bring back more survivors, more knowledge, more ways to fight." Admiral Dodge stood beside us, his face lifted to the sky where the Ogden had vanished. I've seen many brave actions in 15 years of war, but what your colony has accomplished, turning from desperate survival to active rescue, that's humanity at its finest. On the one-year anniversary of the Silver Dawn Initiative, Captain Kregsman called a colony-wide gathering. The original outpost boundaries had become almost invisible, surrounded by new construction and thriving fields. Children played in open areas that had once been considered too dangerous to enter without armed guards. 1 year ago, she began, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd, we faced extinction at the hands of an enemy we barely understood. We stood alone, believing ourselves to be the last remnant of humanity among the stars. She gestured to where Admiral Dodge stood, alongside representatives from the Hyperion, Research Station Gamma, and Earth. Today we stand as part of something greater. We know Earth has been fighting for us all along, searching for survivors, rescuing those they could reach in time. And now, together, we have the means to finally turn the tide. The cheer that rose from the crowd echoed off the mountains surrounding our settlement. In the distance, clouds were gathering for another silver-seeded rainfall, a symbol of how our weapon against the enemy had unexpectedly given life to our new home. After the ceremony, Admiral Dodge requested a tour of our agricultural developments. He walked the fields with genuine wonder, touching the ripening heads of wheat with weathered hands. 15 years fighting the Norax, and this is the first time I've seen actual crops growing on a colony world, he admitted. Most settlements we've found were still relying on hydroponics or emergency rations. The silver was a game changer, I explained, not just against the Norax but for terraforming. The soil infusions from the mountain runoff accelerated everything. He nodded, studying the irrigation channels we'd constructed to manage the increasingly regular rainfall. Earth's agricultural division will want detailed reports on this. If we can replicate this effect on other worlds, we've already compiled comprehensive documentation. Elliot joined us, carrying soil samples from the newest fields. The preliminary data suggests each rainfall brings different mineral profiles, depending on which mountain zone it washes through. We're mapping the patterns to optimize future planting. I thought about how far we had come from that terrifying day when Dr. Jefferson had first shown me the Norax sample, from a desperate maintenance technician carrying an urgent message, to a systems architect helping rebuild human civilization across the stars. Your father would be proud, Ella said, as if reading my thoughts, not just of the systems you've built, but of what you've helped others build. I squeezed her hand gently. We're all just links in a chain. My father laid the groundwork, we expanded on it. The Hyperion survivors will take it further, and their children will reach places we can't imagine. Above us, Earth vessels patrolled, maintaining vigilant watch against any resurgence of the Norax. Around us, the colony, no longer just Dodson Outpost, but a thriving settlement 3 times its original size, pulsed with activity and purpose. The war against the Norax continued. Other colonies still fought for survival against the ancient Silicon enemy. But they fought with the knowledge that they weren't alone, with weapons that could actually win, and with the support of a unified human effort spanning dozens of worlds. Not the last colony after all, but the first of a new beginning. 2 months and 9 days after Admiral Dodge's arrival, Cabria's transformation continued at a pace that would have seemed impossible just a year earlier. The morning dawned with a gentle silver-tinged rain that nourished the expanding fields beyond the settlement's ever-growing boundaries. The precipitation had become so predictable that the agricultural teams had developed planting schedules synchronized to the weather patterns, a luxury unimaginable during the colony's struggling early years. Ravi stood at the window of the newly constructed observatory that crowned the communications center, watching the rain-slicked landing field where 3 vessels were currently docked. The smallest, a retrofitted Earth Defense Fleet courier, renamed Swift Messenger, had arrived yesterday with dispatches and small-scale supplies. The other 2, the massive Ogden and its sister ship, the reclaimed colony vessel Horizon, dwarfed everything else in the vicinity. Admiring your kingdom? Ella's voice carried a teasing note as she joined him, slipping her arm around his waist. Ravi smiled, turning to embrace his wife of exactly 1 month, our very wet, very muddy kingdom. "Happy anniversary," she said, pressing her forehead against his. 1 whole month of marriage in the middle of an interstellar war. Who says romance is dead? "I got you something," he said, reaching into his pocket. "It's not much, but—" "If you say it's not much one more time when you give me something you've clearly put thought into, I'm going to reprogram all your systems to speak in rhyming couplets," she threatened, but her eyes shone with anticipation. He laughed and produced a small pendant, a delicate silver droplet suspended on a chain of intricately woven metal strands. "It's beautiful," she breathed, lifting her hair so he could fasten it around her neck. "The first silver extracted under the new cobbler silver operation," he explained. "And the chain is made from salvaged communication filaments from the Ogden's original systems, old technology meeting new purpose, like us." Before she could respond, the distinctive alert tone for incoming aircraft sounded throughout the complex. 3 short pulses, followed by 2 long, Commodore Charles returning from his latest mission. "Right on schedule," Ravi noted, checking his watch. The man's punctuality is almost supernatural. Together they made their way down to the Central Operations Hub, where Captain Craigsman and Admiral Dodge were already gathered around the monitoring stations. The massive wall display showed the approaching vessel, not the scout ship they had expected, but a full-sized colonial transport easily 3/4 the size of the Ogden. "What in the hell is he flying?" Admiral Dodge demanded, though his tone carried more amazement than concern. Shannon, now operations director for the entire Cabrian settlement, manipulated the sensor controls to enhance the image. That's the Artemis. It was reported destroyed in the Aleph Red system 3 years ago." Admiral Dodge's expression hardened. "So it was. I lost 2 escort vessels trying to reach it before we declared it a total loss." The communications officer raised a hand. "Incoming transmission from Commodore Charles, sir." "Put him through," Captain Craigsman ordered. The speakers crackled to life with Charles's voice, tired but triumphant. "Artemis to Cabria Control, request clearance for landing. Be advised we have approximately 800 survivors aboard and are operating on emergency systems only." 800? Shannon whispered. "The Artemis was designed for 500 at maximum capacity." "Commodore Charles," Admiral Dodge leaned toward the microphone. "This is Admiral Dodge. Your scheduled mission was reconnaissance of the Epsilon Eridani system. Explain your current situation and vessel." There was a brief pause before Charles replied. "It's a long story, Admiral. The short version is that the Epsilon Eridani mission was completed successfully, but on our return journey, we detected a faint distress signal from the Aleph Red system. Investigation revealed survivors of the Artemis colony had managed to repair their vessels sufficiently for life support, but were stranded without adequate propulsion. We transferred our scout ship's hyperspace motivators to the Artemis and brought everyone home." The Admiral's stern expression softened into something approaching astonishment. "You transferred cutting-edge hyperspace technology to a damaged colonial vessel while in potentially hostile space, then piloted said vessel through 3 star systems with emergency systems?" "Yes, sir," came the matter-of-fact reply. "Dr. Hemingway's calculations suggested it was more efficient than attempting multiple trips with our smaller vessel. Also, the Artemis has significant material resources aboard that we deemed valuable to the war effort." Captain Craigsman and Admiral Dodge exchanged looks. "That's why we call him Commodore now," Shannon murmured to Ravi. "He keeps coming back with more ships than we send him out with." The landing was controlled chaos. The Artemis touched down with visibly damaged landing struts, listing slightly to one side until emergency stabilizers were deployed. Medical teams rushed forward as soon as the main hatch opened, while engineering crews began immediate assessment of the vessel's critical systems. Ravi found himself assigned to coordinate the integration of the Artemis's surviving technology with the colony's infrastructure. The vessel's massive fabrication units, industrial-scale 3D printers designed to build colonial structures, were largely intact, though they required significant recalibration after the emergency hyperspace journey. "These will triple our construction capacity," he told Dr. Hemingway as they inspected the units. "With these online, we could expand the residential sectors in weeks instead of months." Dr. Hemingway nodded. Her attention focused on the diagnostic display. "The primary control systems will need a complete overhaul, though." The NURACs targeted them specifically. "Nearly every circuit is fused or corrupted." "We'll implement the cobbler protocol," Ravi replied. "Triple redundancy with at least one fully mechanical backup system." "Speaking of which," she said, looking up, "I've been meaning to ask about cobbler silver. The operation's grown exponentially in just 2 months. How are you managing it alongside your systems integration duties?" Ravi smiled ruefully. "I'm not, really. The silver mining and processing is mostly running itself these days. I set up the infrastructure and protocols, train the teams, then step back to an advisory role. It's Captain Crakesman who insisted on keeping the name." "Smart branding," Dr. Hemingway remarked. "The symbol of humanity's best defense, bearing the name of the man who implemented it. It builds confidence." Before Ravi could protest this characterization, a young lieutenant appeared at the entrance to the fabrication bay. "Mr. Cobble? Commodore Charles requests your presence in the Artemis Command Center immediately. He says they've found something you need to see." The command center of the Artemis bore the unmistakable scars of NURAC's attack. Acid burns marked the walls, and several control stations had been completely destroyed. But the central holographic projector was functioning, displaying a 3-dimensional star map with several points marked in pulsing red. Commodore Charles stood before it, engaged in intense discussion with Admiral Dodge and several officers Ravi didn't recognize, presumably survivors from the Artemis crew. "Ah, Ravi," Charles beckoned him forward. "This is Captain Deborah Coleman, former commander of the Artemis mission. Captain, this is Ravi Cobbler, our systems integration specialist and the mind behind the silver countermeasure." Captain Coleman's face was gaunt from what had clearly been a long ordeal, but her handshake was firm. "Mr. Cobbler, your silver solution saved what was left of my colony. We implemented it immediately after Commodore Charles's team reached us." "Captain Coleman's people didn't just survive the NURACs," Charles explained. "They studied them extensively. The captain manipulated the holographic controls, and the star map zoomed in on a particular system. The NURACs on Aleph Red 2 were different from those you encountered here on Cabria, more advanced, more organized, and they were building something." The hologram shifted to show a massive structure, an array of crystalline towers arranged in a precise geometric pattern that extended for several kilometers across an alien plane. "We believe it's a communication hub," Captain Coleman continued. "The NURACs were constructing it using materials harvested from our colony's infrastructure. When we deployed the silver countermeasure, we didn't just neutralize the NURACs. We interrupted whatever process this hub was meant to facilitate." Admiral Dodge stepped forward, his expression grave. "Captain Coleman's discovery suggests that the NURACs aren't just dormant weapons left from some ancient conflict. They're actively coordinating across star systems." Ravi studied the structure, noting patterns that looked disturbingly similar to some of the communications technology they'd developed on Cabria. "They're adapting our own technology," he realized aloud, "just as we've been adapting theirs." "Precisely," Captain Coleman nodded. "Which brings us to the critical information. Before we evacuated, we detected transmissions from this hub, incomplete but directed at specific coordinates." She adjusted the display again, and the star map expanded to show a series of transmission vectors. They were calling for reinforcement. The implications hung heavy in the air. The NURACs weren't just defending territory, they were mobilizing. "How much time do we have?" Admiral Dodge asked. "Unknown," Captain Coleman replied. "We don't know where the reinforcements would come from or how fast they could arrive, but based on the transmission patterns, I'd estimate months rather than years." Admiral Dodge turned to Ravi. "We need to accelerate silver production. Every colony, every Earth outpost needs to be equipped with silver countermeasures immediately." "The current cobbler silver operation can be scaled up," Ravi calculated rapidly. With the Artemis's fabrication units, we could double production within weeks, triple it in 2 months. Do it, the Admiral ordered, and work with Dr. Hemingway to analyze these transmission patterns. If the Nurax are calling for help, I want to know exactly who they're calling and what's coming. As the meeting concluded, Commodore Charles pulled Ravi aside. There's something else, something not in the official report yet. His voice dropped lower. One of the Artemis research teams found ancient artifacts on E.2. Definitely not Nurax, and definitely not human. A third civilization? Ravi's mind raced with possibilities. That's the working theory. The artifacts include what appears to be a star map, much older than our own interstellar exploration. We've only begun to decode it, but several key markers align with systems currently under Nurax influence. Ravi thought of the countless nights he'd spent with his father, staring up at the stars from their little maintenance bay, imagining what might be out there. So the Nurax might not be the weapon, he said slowly. They might be what's left of whoever lost the war. Charles nodded grimly. Which means somewhere out there could be the civilization that nearly wiped them out. And we have no idea if they'd consider us allies or just another target. That evening, Ravi and Ella finally managed to slip away from their duties for the private anniversary dinner they'd planned. Ella had somehow procured a bottle of actual wine, a miracle in itself on a frontier colony, and they sat in their quarters, a small prefabricated unit that had been among the first structures erected after the Ogden's arrival. To 1 month of partnership, Ella raised her glass. Both matrimonial and interstellar, Ravi smiled, clinking his glass against hers. The way things are accelerating, I wonder what we'll be celebrating by our first anniversary. Victory, hopefully, she said, then studied his face more closely. Something happened today, something beyond the Artemis and 800 new colonists. He hesitated, then shared Commodore Charles's revelation about the ancient artifacts. Ella listened intently, her analytical mind clearly processing the implications. A third player changes everything, she said finally. We've been thinking of this as a straightforward conflict, us versus the Nurax, but if there's another civilization involved, one powerful enough to nearly wipe out the Nurax, then we're caught in the middle of something much bigger than we realized, Ravi finished. Ella reached across the table to take his hand. Your father used to say that in space, redundancy isn't paranoia, it's prerequisite. Maybe the cobbler protocol needs to expand beyond just our systems. What do you mean? I mean, perhaps humanity needs redundancy too. Not just colonies, but different approaches to survival, different strategies for dealing with both the Nurax and whatever else might be out there. Ravi considered this, remembering the silver-seeded rain that had transformed Cabria. Sometimes solutions came from unexpected directions. I think you're right, he said finally, and I think Cabria might be the perfect place to develop those alternatives. We've already proven that adaptation is our strength. Outside their window, the lights of the ever-expanding colony pushed back the darkness. In the distance, the massive silhouettes of the Ogden, the Horizon, and now the Artemis stood as monuments to humanity's resilience and determination to survive. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, integrating 800 survivors, expanding the silver production, deciphering ancient alien artifacts, and preparing for a possible escalation of the Nurax threat. But tonight was for celebrating not just their month of marriage, but the fact that against all odds, humanity continued to find ways forward among the stars. To redundant systems, he proposed, raising his glass once more. And redundant species, Ella added with a smile. May we all find a way to coexist in this vast universe. The silver nitrate particles in Cabria's atmosphere caught the last rays of the setting sun, creating a luminescent halo around the colony. A silent reminder that sometimes the most effective weapons could also become the foundation for new life. 3 weeks after the Artemis landing, Ravi received a summons to the newly established command center, a reinforced structure at the heart of the expanded colony that served as Earth Defense Fleet's forward operating base in this sector. The summons itself wasn't unusual. As head of systems integration and the nominal head of Cobbler Silver, he attended regular strategic briefings. What was unusual was the classification level. Exalted clearance. He arrived to find not just Admiral Dodge and Captain Kregsman, but 3 Earth officials he had never seen before. They wore the understated charcoal uniforms of the United Earth Governmental Authority, a sight Ravi hadn't seen in nearly 16 years. "Mr. Cobbler," Admiral Dodge gestured him to a seat at the conference table. "Allow me to introduce Colonel Terrence Blackwood, Earth's Strategic Resource Commissioner, General James Hawthorne, Interstellar Operations Command, and Commander Victor Sullivan, Chief Tactical Advisor to the Security Council." The introductions alone told Ravi this was no ordinary meeting. Earth had sent its military heavyweights. "We've been reviewing the data from Cobbler Silver operations," Colonel Blackwood began without preamble, his voice carrying the crisp efficiency of someone accustomed to managing resources across battlefronts. "Production has increased 42% in the last 3 weeks, but according to our analysts, you're operating at less than 30% of potential capacity." Ravi nodded cautiously. "That's correct. We've been balancing silver extraction with infrastructure needs for the colony's expansion." General Hawthorne leaned forward. "That balance is about to change, Mr. Cobbler. The Security Council has reviewed Captain Coleman's intelligence from Aleph Red 2. The Nurax communication hub and the evidence of coordination have escalated this conflict from containment to existential priority." Commander Sullivan, a broad-shouldered man with a tactical analyst's calculating gaze, activated a holographic display at the center of the table. "This is the current deployment map of silver countermeasures across human space." The display showed dozens of worlds, each marked with color coding that Ravi quickly interpreted. Green for secure, yellow for contested, red for critical. Too many red points glowed like warning beacons. "Earth's silver reserves were depleted 3 years ago," he continued. "We've been synthesizing substitutes with limited success. Nothing approaches the effectiveness of natural silver, particularly the unique isotopic composition found in Cambrian silver." Colonel Blackwood took over. "Mr. Cobbler, I'll be direct. Earth is issuing an executive resource directive. As of 800 tomorrow, Cobbler Silver is being designated a strategic war asset. You will be given all necessary resources to scale operations to maximum capacity within 30 days. Ravi felt the weight of those words. Executive resource directives were the highest level of economic intervention Earth could impose, a measure reserved for truly desperate times. "What does that mean for the colony's development?" he asked, thinking of the carefully balanced growth plans they had established. Admiral Dodge answered, "Cabria has been redesignated as a specialized production world. Non-essential expansion will be paused. The defense fleet is sending 3 additional vessels with mining equipment and specialized personnel. We're also reassigning colonists with relevant skills to support the silver operation." "This isn't just about production," General Hawthorne added. "It's about strategic deployment. We've lost 11 colonies in the past year alone. The latest intelligence suggests coordinated Norax offensives in at least 3 sectors. We need silver not just extracted but processed, weaponized, and distributed with military efficiency." Ravi processed this information, his mind already calculating the implications. "The current processing facilities can't handle that scale of production. We'd need to expand the refining operations by at least 5-fold. "Already approved," Colonel Blackwood nodded. "The Swift Messenger departed Earth 3 days ago, with prefabricated processing modules and a technical team. You'll have everything you need. And my current duties, systems integration requires, will be reassigned," Captain Kriegsman interjected. "Ravi, they're not asking. This is a direct order from Earth. Cabria's best chance of survival, humanity's best chance, is to leverage our unique advantage to the fullest." There was a moment of silence as Ravi absorbed the magnitude of the change being imposed. Then Commander Sullivan spoke again, his tone firm but respectful. "Mr. Cobbler, we've reviewed your background extensively. Before Cabria, you were a maintenance technician. In less than 2 years, you become the architect of humanity's most effective defense against the Nurax. We need that same adaptive brilliance. focused entirely on silver production and deployment now. Admiral Dodge slid a datapad across the table. These are the official directives. You'll be given the rank of Resource Commander with authority to requisition any materials or personnel needed. Your wife, Ella Cobbler, is being appointed Chief Process Engineer for the operation. Ella hasn't agreed to this, Ravi pointed out. She's being briefed separately right now, Captain Craigsman said, though I suspect she'll have similar reservations. Colonel Blackwood closed his portfolio with a decisive snap. This isn't open for negotiation, Commander Cobbler. Earth expects full compliance and maximum production within 45 days. The fate of human civilization may well depend on it. The meeting concluded shortly after, leaving Ravi with a datapad full of directives and a mind racing with calculations. He found Ella waiting outside, her expression suggesting her briefing had been equally blunt. Resource Commander, she greeted him with a raised eyebrow. Chief Process Engineer, he countered. They walked in silence through the busy corridors of the command center, each processing the dramatic shift in their circumstances. Outside, they paused to look across the expanded colony, a settlement that had grown from desperate outposts to thriving community under their care. They're putting the entire colony on war footing, Ella said finally. Shannon's been appointed colonial administrator. Dr. Jefferson is establishing a separate research division focused solely on silver-based technologies. Did they show you the deployment map? Ravi asked. She nodded grimly. 17 critical front lines. Earth strategists believe we have less than 6 months before the Nurox reinforcements that Captain Coleman detected begin arriving. 6 months to turn the tide of a war that's been raging for 15 years. Ravi shook his head. Using technology that we discovered by accident. Not accident, Ella corrected, echoing a conversation they'd had many times. Adaptation, necessity, the same qualities they're counting on now. They continued walking toward the silver processing facility at the colony's eastern perimeter. The complex had already grown substantially since its establishment 2 months earlier, with 3 large refineries and a testing range where various silver-based weapons were evaluated before deployment. I've been running the calculations, Ella said, as they surveyed the operation that was about to become their primary responsibility. With the right equipment and personnel allocation, we could increase production by 300% in the first month alone. After that, the limiting factor becomes raw material extraction. The mountain range to the north is rich with silver deposits, Ravi noted. Initial surveys indicated at least 3 major veins that we haven't even touched yet. But accessing them would require significant excavation equipment, Ella pointed out, and transportation infrastructure to move the ore. Ravi checked the datapad, scrolling through the resource allocations. According to this, we're getting 20 heavy mining mechs, 15 automated excavation drones, and components for a magnetic rail system. Ella's eyes widened. Earth is serious about this. Earth is desperate, Ravi corrected softly, and betting everything on Cabrian silver. That evening, they returned to their quarters to find Shannon waiting for them, along with Commodore Charles and Hemingway. The informal council they had formed to manage colony affairs had apparently decided to convene one last time before their roles changed forever. So, Shannon began, Resource Commander Cobbler and Chief Engineer Cobbler? Impressive titles, Ravi corrected, but without rancor. Did you all receive similar reassignments? Commodore Charles nodded. I've been appointed Fleet Coordination Officer for the Silicate Front. My rescue missions are being formalized into a strategic extraction program with 4 additional vessels under my command. Colonial Administrator, Shannon said, raising her hand. Apparently I'll be managing civilian operations while you 2 build your silver empire. Research Director, Hemingway added, focused on both Nurox countermeasures and analysis of the Alf-Red artifacts. Ravi looked at each of them. Friends, forged through crisis, now being separated by the machinery of war. This changes everything, he said finally. The colony was supposed to be about more than just survival. It was about building something new. And it will be again, Hemingway assured him. But first, we have to ensure there's a future to build in. Shannon produced a bottle, not wine this time, but something stronger that Ravi guessed had been salvaged from one of the rescue missions. I propose a toast to the last night of Cabria as a colony and the first night of Cabria as the front line of humanity's counteroffensive. They drank to that, and to other more personal acknowledgments, to the partnerships they had formed, to the systems they had built together, to the struggles they had overcome. As the evening wound down, Commodore Charles drew Ravi aside. "There's something else you should know, something not in the official briefings." "About the third civilization?" Ravi guessed. Charles nodded. "About the origins of the Nurax. The artifacts we found on Alfred II included what appears to be a historical record, fragmentary but clear enough. The Nurax were created as autonomous weapons platforms." "By whom?" "A civilization that appears to have vanished millions of years ago. The records suggest they built the Nurax as self-replicating defensive systems meant to protect their territory from a rival power. The third civilization we've been detecting traces of." Ravi felt a chill. "So they're programmed war machines without masters?" "Precisely. Self-sustaining, self-replicating drones built for a war that ended eons ago. They identify any technological civilization as a potential threat and activate to eliminate it. The records suggest they were designed to remain dormant for millennia if necessary, like interstellar landmines waiting for someone to stumble upon them. The implications were staggering. So, when we settled on these territories, we triggered automated defense protocols programmed millions of years ago," Charles finished. "But that's not the most concerning part. The record suggests the third civilization, the one the Nurax were created to fight, may still exist somewhere in this sector of space." "Different how?" "We don't know yet. The translation is incomplete. But their weapons technology would have to be formidable to threaten a civilization capable of creating something as sophisticated as the Nurax. We may be dealing with not one, but two ancient military technologies far beyond our understanding." Ravi thought of the silver pendant he had given Ella, of the rain falling on Cabria, of the way their accidental solution had changed not just the Nurax, but the very world they inhabited. A simple element defeating complex war machines. "We need to accelerate the artifact research," he said. "If we're going to be producing the weapons for this war, we need to understand what we're truly fighting, and what else might be waiting out there, forgotten but not gone." Charles nodded. "I've already spoken with Hemingway. He's prioritizing the translation effort, but for now, Earth needs silver. They need the one advantage we've found. And they'll have it," Ravi promised. "But we'll keep looking for other solutions too." The next morning arrived with the methodical precision of military efficiency. Even before Ravi and Ella reached the newly designated Cobbler Silver Command Center, they could see the changes beginning. Transport shuttles from the orbiting Earth vessels were already delivering equipment and personnel. Survey teams were deploying toward the northern mountains. Construction crews were marking out expansions for the processing facilities. A young lieutenant saluted as they approached. "Commander Cobbler, Engineer Cobbler, your command staff is assembled and waiting for initial directives." Ravi exchanged a glance with Ella, who offered a small smile. "Shall we begin?" she asked. He nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders, not just for the colony now, but potentially for the fate of human civilization. His father's words echoed in his mind. In space, redundancy isn't paranoia, it's prerequisite. "Let's build something that can't fail," he said. By the 2-month mark of the Executive Resource Directive, Cabria had been transformed again. What had once been a balanced colony with diverse operations was now dominated by a single purpose: silver extraction, processing, and deployment. The northern mountain range, previously untouched, now bore the marks of intensive mining operations. 5 major excavation sites had been established, each connected to the central processing facility by a magnetic rail system that transported ore continuously. The processing facility itself had expanded to cover nearly a square kilometer, with 7 refineries operating at full capacity. Ravi stood on the observation platform of what the crews had begun calling Silver Command, watching the intricate dance of machinery and personnel below. The operation had grown to employ over 2,000 workers, a mix of Cabrian colonists, Earth specialists, and survivors from rescued settlements with relevant skills. "Production report week 8, Ella announced, joining him with a data pad. Despite the formality of the title, she had refused to adopt the military uniform that Earth had tried to assign them both, instead wearing practical work clothes with various tools attached to a utility belt. "We've exceeded the target by 12%. 15,000 units processed and ready for deployment." "Shipping status?" Ravi asked, focusing on the streams of data that measured their success. "The Horizon departs tomorrow with 8,000 units for the Proxima Centauri front. The Swift Messenger leaves this afternoon with specialized payloads for the research stations in the Tau Ceti system." Ravi nodded, satisfied but not complacent. "And the new extraction site in the Eastern Range?" "Initial surveys confirmed Admiral Dodge's hunch. The silver concentration is 32% higher than our primary sites, though the depth will require specialized equipment. I've already reassigned Team 4 to begin preparations." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Shannon, who looked both exhausted and exhilarated. As colonial administrator, she had been tasked with managing the massive influx of resources and personnel while maintaining essential services for the resident population. "The agricultural expansion is finally back on schedule," she reported. "With the silver-enhanced irrigation systems, we've increased yield by 60% this quarter. At this rate, we'll be entirely self-sufficient within 6 months, even with the population increase." This was welcome news. Despite the singular focus on silver production, Ravi had insisted that the colony's food independence remain a priority. The silver-seeded rains continued to transform Cabria's landscape, creating opportunities that would have been unimaginable when they first arrived. "Any word from Commodore Charles?" Ravi asked. Shannon's expression sobered. "The rescue fleet returned from the Lambda Serpentis system last night. They extracted nearly 3,000 colonists, but lost the Pathfinder in the process." The loss of a vessel, and likely its crew, was a sharp reminder of the stakes they were facing. The Pathfinder had been a scout ship, fast and maneuverable, used to penetrate Nurak's defenses ahead of the larger rescue vessels. Ella asked quietly. 14 confirmed. 9 crew members and 5 colonial militia who were providing defense during the evacuation. They observed a moment of silence for the lost. Despite the industrial scale of the operation they now ran, Ravi insisted on acknowledging every sacrifice, every loss. It kept them grounded in the human cost of the war they were supplying. "Admiral Dodge has requested a briefing at 1600, Shannon added. "Apparently, Earth's Strategic Command has new intelligence about Nurak's movements in the Aleph Red sector." After Shannon departed, Ravi and Ella conducted their daily inspection of the processing facilities. What had begun as a small-scale operation extracting silver from nearby deposits had evolved into a sophisticated industrial complex employing advanced purification techniques and precision manufacturing. The central refinery floor bustled with activity as raw silver ore was transformed through multiple stages into the specialized compounds that formed the basis of humanity's most effective weapon against the Noraks. Some would become aerosol dispersal systems for planetary defense. Others would be fashioned into targeted ammunition for military operations. Still others would be integrated into shielding technology to protect vital installations. "Commander Cobbler," one of the section chiefs approached with a concerned expression. "We're detecting some irregularities in batch 117. The crystallization pattern is showing anomalous formations at the molecular level." Ella examined the diagnostic display, her brow furrowing. "Increase the electromagnetic field strength by 7% and adjust the thermal gradient. The mountain rains last week might have altered the mineral composition in the eastern deposits." The chief nodded and hurried to implement her instructions. This constant adaptation was what made the Cabrian operation special, the ability to adjust processes in real time to accommodate the changing conditions of a world that was itself being transformed by the very substance they were harvesting. You know, Ravi observed as they continued their inspection, for someone who was reluctant to become chief process engineer, you've developed an impressive command of silver metallurgy. Ella smiled wryly. Necessity is the mother of expertise. Besides, it's fascinating from a scientific perspective. The way the silver interacts with Cambrian minerals is unlike anything in Earth's textbooks. We're writing new chapters in material science every day. As they reached the final testing range, they paused to watch a demonstration of the latest silver-based countermeasure, a pulse generator that created a dispersal field effective against NORAD's swarm tactics. "Impressive," remarked a voice behind them. They turned to find Commander Sullivan, the Earth Tactical Advisor, observing with professional interest. "Commander Sullivan," Ravi acknowledged, "we weren't expecting you until the briefing." "I wanted to see the operation for myself," he replied. "The reports are impressive, but they don't capture the full scope of what you've built here." "What we've been ordered to build," Ella corrected, a hint of the resistance that still lingered in her tone. Sullivan studied her thoughtfully. "You disapprove of the militarization?" "I understand its necessity," Ella replied carefully. "But I'm an engineer, not a weapons manufacturer. I'd rather be exploring the terraforming possibilities of silver interaction with Cabria's ecosystem." "An opportunity that may yet come," Sullivan assured her, "but first survival." He turned to Ravi. "Commander, I have information that couldn't wait for the formal briefing. The artifact translation team has made a breakthrough in understanding the NORAD's communication patterns." Both Ravi and Ella instantly focused on him with renewed attention. "The signals detected from the Aleph Red hub weren't just calling for reinforcements," Sullivan explained. "They were activating dormant NORAD units in systems we thought were secure, including Earth's solar system." The implication struck Ravi like a physical blow. "Mars and Venus, the abandoned terraforming projects." Sullivan nodded grimly. "Precisely. When humanity attempted to terraform Mars and Venus decades ago, we may have inadvertently triggered dormant NORAD units that had lain inactive for millennia. The projects were abandoned due to unforeseen complications that in retrospect match NORAD sabotage patterns." "Earth never connected these events to the colony problems?" Ella asked incredulously. "They occurred nearly 20 years apart and manifested differently," Sullivan explained. "It's only with Captain Coleman's data that we've been able to recognize the pattern." Ravi's mind raced with implications. "If there are dormant NORAD units in our home system, then we're fighting a war with enemies both without and within," Sullivan confirmed. "The Security Council believes the Aleph Red transmission was the activation signal. We may have months, perhaps only weeks, before the solar system units achieve full deployment." "We need to redirect production," Ravi decided immediately. "Prioritize Earth's home defense systems. Establish a direct supply line to—" "That's exactly what I came to discuss," Sullivan interrupted. "The Security Council has authorized Phase 2 of the Executive Resource Directive. Effective immediately, you are granted autonomy to determine production priorities and deployment strategies. Earth is transferring full operational control of silver countermeasure production to Cabria." "Autonomy?" Ella repeated, surprised. "That's unusual for a strategic war asset." "Unprecedented," Sullivan acknowledged. "But necessity dictates innovation. Your operation has consistently outperformed Earth's projections. More importantly, you understand the unique properties of Cambrian silver better than anyone. The Council believes your judgment is our best chance for optimal deployment." "This changes our entire strategic approach," Ravi said, already mentally reconfiguring the production schedules. "We'll need to establish multiple supply lines, prioritize based on threat levels and defensive capabilities." "That's why I'm here," Sullivan said. "To provide full access to Earth's intelligence network and deployment capabilities. Combined with your production expertise, we may have a fighting chance." As they walked toward the command center to begin planning this new phase of operations, Ravi felt a strange mixture of dread and determination. The stakes had just risen exponentially, but so had their ability to respond effectively. "Resource Commander," Sullivan said, using his official title with what almost sounded like respect. "What Earth needs now isn't just silver. It's the cobbler protocol applied to our entire defensive strategy. Multiple redundancies, mechanical backups for digital systems. The approach that saved Cabriá might now save Earth itself." Ravi exchanged a glance with Ella, finding in her eyes the same resolute determination he felt. They had built this operation under duress, transformed from colony specialists to industrial commanders by necessity. Now they would transform again, from producers to strategists, from suppliers to architects of humanity's defense. "We'll need to expand again," Ella said, her mind already calculating the requirements. "Triple current capacity within 60 days, with specialized production lines for system-specific deployment. And establish direct coordination with Commodore Charles's rescue fleet," Ravi added. "Every extracted colony adds to our knowledge base and provides skilled personnel." Sullivan nodded, a flicker of hope visible beneath his professional demeanor. "Earth is counting on you, both of you." As they reached the command center, Ravi paused to look back at the sprawling silver operation, a complex that had grown from nothing to humanity's most critical resource in less than 6 months. Not just a business or a military asset, but perhaps the cornerstone of human survival. "We built this to save our colony," he said quietly. "Now we build to save our species." The silver particles in Cabria's atmosphere caught the afternoon sunlight, creating a shimmering haze above the facility, a visible reminder that sometimes the most effective defense could also become the foundation for a new beginning. Whatever came next, whether victory or transformation, it would begin here, with silver and determination and the legacy of a maintenance technician who believed in redundant systems. "Let's get to work," Ella said, taking his hand briefly. "We have a war to win." Together they stepped into the command center to face humanity's greatest challenge yet. 2 weeks later, Ravi stood at the observation platform overlooking what had become known as Silver Valley, the expansive mining and processing complex that now dominated the northern region of the Cabrian settlement. 7 massive excavation sites were operational, with 3 more under development, each connected to the central refineries by an intricate magnetic rail system that ran day and night. "Production report, day 15 of Phase 2, Brigadier Tanner announced, approaching with a data tablet. The career military officer had been assigned as Ravi's liaison with Earth's defense forces, a gruff but efficient man who had quickly learned to respect the former maintenance technician's systematic approach to logistics. "We've exceeded targets by 17%, 22,000 units processed and packaged for deployment." "Shipping status?" Ravi asked, studying the activity below where automated loaders were filling the cargo hold of the Swift Messenger. "Relief convoy for the Tau Ceti front departs in 2 hours. The Horizon is being loaded for the direct Earth run. Sporadically calibrated for the Mars perimeter." Ravi nodded, satisfied but not complacent. "And the new extraction site in the Western Range?" "Teams report silver concentration 43% higher than our primary sites. Initial excavation begins tomorrow at 600. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Commodore Charles, who looked worn but resolute. His rescue fleet had just returned from its 3rd mission since the Executive Resource Directive had been implemented, bringing with it not just survivors but critical intelligence from the frontier of the conflict. "The deployment worked," he said without preamble. "The Sirius colony's defensive perimeter held against a coordinated Nurax assault. First confirmed victory using the new dispersal protocol." This was welcome news. For 15 years, human settlements had been fighting defensive actions, merely trying to survive. The silver countermeasures had provided protection, but the new tactical deployment methods developed by Ravi's team were the first to actually push back Nurax advances. "Casualties?" Ravi asked. "Minimal. 7 defense personnel, no civilians. The Nurax units attempted to adapt to the silver dispersal, but the multi-layer approach prevented them from developing countermeasures. The multi-layer approach had been Ella's innovation. Recognizing that the Nurax units appeared capable of limited adaptation, she had developed a tiered deployment system. that use different silver compounds in succession, overwhelming the machine's ability to reconfigure their defenses. "Admiral Dodge is requesting a briefing at 1800, Charles added. "The Security Council wants updates on the Earth home system defense preparations." After Charles departed, Ravi continued his inspection of the processing facilities. What had begun as a small-scale operation had evolved into humanity's largest weapons manufacturing complex. Employing technology that didn't exist 6 months ago, the main refinery floor stretched for nearly half a kilometer, a carefully orchestrated dance of precision machinery and skilled technicians. Raw silver ore moved through multiple processing stages, emerging as specialized compounds tailored to counter the specific Neurax variants identified in different star systems. "Commander Cobbler," Lieutenant Rodriguez approached with a concerned expression. "We're detecting unusual crystallization patterns in batch 247. The molecular structure is showing signs of instability." Ravi examined the diagnostic display, recognizing immediately what was happening. "Increase the electromagnetic containment field by 12% and reduce the thermal gradient. The latest ore shipment from the northern peaks contains trace elements we haven't fully characterized yet." The lieutenant nodded and hurried to implement the adjustments. This constant adaptation was what had made Cabria's operation so effective. The ability to innovate in real time, responding to the unique properties of a world that was itself being transformed by the same substance they were harvesting. Ravi made his way to the research division, where Hemingway and his team had been working to decode more of the ancient artifacts from E.2. The facility was a stark contrast to the industrial might of the silver operation, quiet, methodical, with holographic displays showing fragmented alien symbols and partial translations. "Progress?" Ravi asked, finding Hemingway hunched over a particularly complex display. "Significant," the researcher replied, not looking up immediately. "We've confirmed the Neurax were created approximately 2.7 million years ago by a civilization we're calling the Architects. They were designed as autonomous defense platforms programmed to eliminate any technological civilization that entered certain regions of space." "Any indication of why?" Ravi asked. "The Architects were at war with another advanced civilization, one we're calling the Ascendants. The records suggest this war lasted for millennia, with both sides developing increasingly sophisticated autonomous weapons as their organic populations dwindled." "And the Neurax were the final solution," Ravi surmised. "One of them," Hemingway corrected. "The Neurax were designed to be self-replicating, self-evolving sentinel systems that would persist long after the Architects themselves were gone. They were programmed to identify, analyze, and eliminate technological civilizations matching certain patterns, presumably to prevent the resurgence of their enemies. And we triggered them because our technology resembles the Ascendants? That's our working theory. The Neurax appear to be pattern recognition systems that identify specific technological signatures when we established colonies on worlds where they lay dormant. Our power systems, communications technology, or some other aspect of our infrastructure matched one of their target profiles." Ravi considered this information. "Could we modify our technology to avoid triggering them? Possibly, for new settlements. But for established colonies, it's too late. Once activated, the Neurax are programmed to pursue total elimination of the triggering civilization." "And the silver?" Ravi asked. "Any insight into why it's so effective against them?" Hemingway pulled up another display showing molecular interactions between silver compounds and what appeared to be the microscopic structure of a Neurax. Silver disrupts their communication and replication systems at the nanoscale level. It appears the Architects never encountered this particular element in sufficient quantities to develop countermeasures against it. "A blind spot in their programming," Ravi mused. "A gap in their armor that's giving us a fighting chance." "More than a chance," Hemingway corrected. "Based on deployment results from the front lines, we're actually winning, Ravi. For the first time in 15 years, humanity is pushing the Neurax back." As Ravi left the research division, he found Ella waiting for him, her expression both exhausted and exhilarated, the look of someone accomplishing the impossible on a daily basis. "The new dispersal system passed its final tests," she reported as they walked toward the command center, 3 times more efficient than the original design, with targeted delivery capabilities that reduce waste by 80%. That will make a significant difference for the distant fronts, Ravi noted. The logistics of transporting silver countermeasures across interstellar distances had been one of their biggest challenges. Any progress on the atmospheric deployment for Earth's system? Full-scale production begins tomorrow. The simulations predict 97% effectiveness against the projected Nurax density on Mars. They reached the command center, where Admiral Dodge and the senior Earth officers were already gathering for the briefing. The massive strategic display showed the status of human settlements across known space. Green for secure, yellow for contested, red for critical. 6 months ago, the display had been predominantly red. Now, growing patches of green showed where the tide was turning. Admiral Dodge acknowledged their arrival with a nod of respect, a gesture that would have been unimaginable when they first met, when Ravi had been just a maintenance technician with an unlikely solution. "Commander Cobbler, Engineer Cobbler," the Admiral greeted them. "The Security Council is online and waiting for your briefing." As they took their places at the conference table, facing the holographic projections of Earth's highest military and civilian leaders, Ravi reflected on how far they had come from that terrifying day when he had first seen a Norax sample in Jefferson's lab. From desperate survivors to the architects of humanity's counteroffensive, the silver that had saved their small colony was now becoming the shield for an entire species, and the systems integration specialist who had once worried about backup power supplies was now coordinating the defense of human civilization itself. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ravi began, addressing the Security Council, "I'm pleased to report that Operation Silver Dawn has achieved full deployment capacity. The Norax incursion in Earth's solar system can now be contained and eliminated. The war is not over, but for the first time since it began, victory is within our grasp." As he detailed the production achievements, deployment strategies, and tactical innovations developed on Cabria, Ravi knew that whatever happened next, the colony had fulfilled a purpose greater than anyone could have imagined when they first set out from Earth 16 years ago. Not the last outpost of a dying species, but the first line of defense in humanity's greatest test, a test they were now, against all odds, beginning to pass. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave this video a like and subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this. Video shares, memberships, and super thanks help the channel grow as well, so feel free to partner with this channel in that way as we grow. With that all said, thank you again for listening to the story, and thank you for your time. On the left side of your screen are some videos I think you might be interested in. I hope to see you in the next one.